Let's get it Star Wars. Let's get it Star Wars in here. Let's get it Star Wars. Let's get it Star Wars in here.
A small rebel force has penetrated the shield and landed on Endor.
This is where the fun begins.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
This is Rebel Force Radio,
your source for the Force.
Star Wars news and commentary
With Jason Swank and Jimmy Mack.
I've seen Star Wars 500 times.
Star Wars #1.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe. I suggest we use it.
Now it's time for Rebel Force Radio.
We would be honored if you would join us.
I tell you what, you guys are so great out there listening to Rebel Force Radio. I put the call out last week. I was having problems. I'm having problems with my toys. And got many, many emails, posts on social, some really good suggestions that I've got 3 candidates that we'll talk about. I think that actually may be the solution. Talk about that in a little bit here on Rebel Force Radio. So great to be with you. Thank you for tuning into the podcast and giving us a listen. If you're new to the program, welcome. We love to have new folks listening to the show. We've got people dropping in all the time, people discovering us on YouTube. That's a common thing we hear. Or, I was bored. I wanted to listen to a podcast about Star Wars, and I listened to a bunch of them, and I finally found you guys. Thank goodness. We hear that one quite a bit, too. But we got a great show for you this week. I'm really excited. In the Cantina, guy that I am a big fan of, Brian Volk-Weiss, who is the head guy at the Nacelle Company. You've probably heard of them because they produce a great documentary series like The Toys That Made Us, the movies that made us, the holiday movies that made us. And they also are responsible for Icons Unearthed Star Wars, which we've been covering here on RFR for the last couple of weeks. Well, Brian is the head of that company, and he also happens to be the director of the Icons Unearthed documentary. We're going to have him in the Cantina. So excited to do that. And if you love Star Wars, you probably heard of this guy, my good friend and yours from Chicago, who also loves Star Wars, Jimmy Mack.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Star Wars fans. Yes, I do love Star Wars, darn it. And there's been so much to consume lately. This week I've been busy, of course, with the Vice TV's Icons Unearthed. That's been a lot of fun to watch them unveil a new episode each week here. We're at the exact midway point of that series, and I really look forward to it. And most notably because there are interviews with some of the misfits in the history of Star Wars, meaning people
the
like...
Misfits. The misfits. I think we're the misfits of Star Wars.
Oh, absolutely. That's why I'm so drawn to this production. Is the misfits are being featured. Yes, the misfits, guys like John Dykstra, who George Lucas famously gave the cold shoulder to when he moved ILM up north to the Bay Area and did not invite John Dykstra to go up with him. But those two were famously going through a lot of friction with each other.
They were really at odds, weren't they? That's very clear in this documentary. And I think George was going along to get along, and then once he didn't need John anymore, I get the feeling, Jim, that George is a guy that never forgets. He's one of those.
I think he knows how to hold a grudge.
Yes, for sure.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. And also another misfit would be Marcia Lucas. Marcia Lucas, who has famously been largely scrubbed from the history of Star Wars.
Amazing.
At least when the story is told from the George Lucas / Lucasfilm perspective. But on Icons Unearthed, it's an independent production produced outside of the Lucasfilm walls and probably a little more straightforward and truthful than some of the information we got in the past. And I find that each week there's a new revelation, at least one or two, within these interviews with these creatives behind the original Star Wars. So that's a lot of fun to watch. Episode 3 out now, focusing on Empire Strikes Back. And then there's 3 more episodes to follow up.
It's on Vice, and I know I've heard from some people say, I don't even know if I have Vice. It's not one of the most well-known of the networks or the channels. But if you are a Hulu subscriber, if you get your cable through Hulu, it is available there. So I've been able to watch it, and it used to be the old G4, I think, that is now Vice. So
I see.
Yeah, that's changed hands multiple times. But
G4 was originally known as Tech TV back.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah. It became G4, and now I guess it's Vice. I don't know,
Yeah.
but it's a really good series. But the thing I really had to tear myself away from to come and record this show
Hawks
was
game?
the new ILM documentary. What's that?
I said Hawks game.
No, dude, we're in the middle of the summer. The Stanley
hockey
Cup
season?
final is come and gone.
Oh,
It's no
sorry.
hockey
I thought
in
it was
the
like
summer.
I thought the hockey season was like 10 and a half months long.
No, check in with me in October.
Okay, all right.
Because we'll be back at it then. But for now, it's
I don't know from sports.
It's summertime. It's baseball. It's summertime. What are you thinking? I had to tear myself away from the Disney Plus while I was watching the ILM documentary series Light and Magic.
Oh yeah.
Remember that it was being heavily promoted at Star Wars Celebration in Anaheim. And it's this great series produced by Ron Howard's production company with Brian Glazer and directed by Lawrence Kasdan about the history of ILM and all of the groundbreaking special effects they did, starting with Star Wars and then moving into other films, from other studios and companies, Willow then with the morphing technology, then of course Jurassic Park, full-on CGI dinosaurs. It's all there. And it's a really, really, really good series. I've seen 5 of the 6 episodes. I binged.
Yeah, I haven't
which is
seen
rare,
any of these.
rare for me to do.
Is
it was
George
just released,
is George in this
week? Oh God, yeah.
Okay,
He's
all
all
right.
over this thing.
All right, so
And
like
what's great-
new George,
Brand new. Lawrence
New
Kasdan
George.
conducted all of the interviews,
Mm-hmm.
and you have every major player, including that misfit John Dykstra. They feature him with new interviews.
Does
Richard
George
Edlund.
know that he's in the documentary with John Dykstra?
Well, George doesn't own Lucasfilm anymore, so but I'm sure he did. You know,
Yeah.
but what can George say? You know, it's really impossible to fully scrub John Dykstra out of the history of Star Wars. It's
You can't do it.
absolutely impossible.
You
You can't do that. He's the guy who put the original team together, and he's the guy who pushed them all to basically reinvent the way films are made. And they did it from scratch too, these crazy guys. I mean, what a crew at ILM. Richard Edlund. Richard Edlund, I always thought was just like this unassuming cameraman and stuff, but boy, his list of credentials and all of the things he invented and actually built by hand. John Knoll, heavily featured, of course.
Well, you'd have
And,
to. Be, yeah.
I mean, these guys are just insane. And it's so well put together. And the thing that I like about George Lucas being in it is he seems much more loose and laid back than he typically is. He seems kind of
Really?
tight.
We get
and
like a
stuffed
chill
shirt
George
sort of
in this?
interview. Well, he laughs at a lot of things that happen and a lot of the risks he took along the way. He sort of puts things in perspective and really, you know, pushes forward the notion that these guys had no idea what they had gotten into, what they were doing, and it was really close to becoming a disaster. I mean, everyone rose to the challenge and really reinvented the way films are made. So it's just such a great documentary. Of course, they talked to Steven Spielberg, they talked to James Cameron, they talked to all the big guys who's ever worked with Lucasfilm and ILM. And yeah, so good. Well put together too. It just launched this week. So
how long are the episodes?
you know,
Is this like full length? Are they?
Oh yeah, they're like 45 to an hour long, I guess. It seems like they're mostly an hour long.
So we got like the battle of the documentaries going on, right? We got the ILM going on. We got the Icons Unearthed.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. Last night I
fantastic
rolled
time.
right from Icons Unearthed into the Light and Magic. And
Yeah,
it's
I haven't
just
watched Light and Magic.
nonstop.
I've been hearing obviously people talking about, so I will catch it. I'm up to my gills in puppy teeth and puppy poop.
Oh, yeah.
And puppy
Yeah, I know how
pee.
that goes.
And all I can do is I just say, okay, one more hour, and then he falls asleep, and I can go to bed.
It's just like having a baby.
It is like having a baby.
Well, and it's going to be that way for the next couple years. So,
yeah. Oh God, years. Oh, come
couple
on,
of years. Yes,
Oh,
yes, sir.
geez.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Years.
Takes them about 2 years to get through their puppiness, where you have to hide your shoes and things like that. But hey, we're happy to have Rebel.
Yeah, we're
Rebel,
happy.
the RFR studio mascot.
He's not as chill. I keep watching that video back when I brought him on the show, and Mac's like, "Oh, you look at him. He's so chill." Yeah, he's not so chill anymore.
Yeah.
He's the Tasmanian
Found his
devil.
energy, yeah.
Yeah, he did.
Oh yeah,
Good
that's
Lord.
what puppies do.
Yeah,
But that's a whole nother year. Nope, 2 years. You're
2
gonna be
years. Man, oh man. Well,
wow.
next week, this is really exciting. I mean, I know you're even more excited than I am, but next week we have a very special Rebel Force Radio.
I can't wait for this. Next week, RFR will be coming at you live from Rancho Obi-Wan next Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern on YouTube.
Live!
I'll be out there with Steve Sansweet live. I'll be out there with Steve Sansweet and Ann Newman and Stu, and we're going to be having a good old time taking live calls, and we'll be standing at the ready should somebody want to see something from the museum up close.
Are you saying that
She will
Steve's
run
going
and
to do
fetch it.
requests? It's sort of like the Sansweet version of doing a request. Do the telescoping saber, Steve.
Rapid fire Boba Fett. Well, I can't wait. That's going to be a lot of fun. So we'll be live, and we'll be able to ask Steve all the questions that we've always wanted to. We've had him on the show so many times, but it occurred to me that there are like really some very straightforward questions I have for him that I never brought up. And it'll just be great to sit down with the man himself and have him just to us for a couple hours on YouTube.
Oh, we've never done anything like that. And then to give it to the Rebel Force Radio live, listening, watching audience, that's going to be a lot of fun.
We'll be encouraging super chats and giving whatever money we raise via super chats over to Rancho Obi-Wan so they can maintain the museum. Also, there will be information. A link will be made available to make a direct donation if super chats aren't your thing. And we strongly encourage everybody listening to the show to do that because it's so important that we do everything we can to maintain the health of Rancho Obi-Wan as it goes into the future. There are big plans for.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Steve's got huge plans. We were getting some of those details at Star Wars Celebration at the Rancho exhibit, but yeah, it's going to be fantastic. It looks like there, could be a merger in store with at least three of the largest Star Wars collections on the planet. So imagine that all under one roof.
Yes. And I heard one of the early contenders for where this museum could actually be. And the location itself has huge historical significance to Star Wars. Let me just say.
Wow.
I can't say anything else other than that. But for now, the museum is settled in its home in Petaluma, California, at Rancho Obi-Wan, and the displays are all shifting and changing. It's never the same trip twice to Rancho Obi-Wan because everything gets shifted around and moved around, and does a really good job with the displays and their volunteers and everyone. And so we just want to do whatever we can to make sure the world's largest Star Wars collection under one roof stays available and accessible to Star Wars fans everywhere. So look toward a membership at ranchoobiwan.org. I just re-upped my annual membership today.
Yeah, I just got my packet with a new patch, a new pin for the current year. It's really cool. If you're an Obi-Wan fan, look, whether you're into like the collectibles or not, if you're an Obi-Wan fan, you got to do this just because there's always some cool Obi-Wan
right,
thing that they send with the membership kit each year. So sometimes it's a patch or a pin or both, things like that. So if you love the Obi-Wan character as Steve does, as a lot of us do, it's a great way to get some really exclusive Obi-Wan merch. Old Ben, young Ben.
Absolutely. Steve does love Obi-Wan Kenobi, so it'll be nice to get his review of the streaming series.
Yeah.
That'll be really cool. Well, speaking of the Obi-Wan series, John Marcoux was supposed to join us this week with the mythological breakdown of Obi-Wan Kenobi, but some scheduling snafus came into play. So we'll get him after I get back from California. We'll have John come over and blow our minds. He was sitting on my porch the other day just riffing on the Kenobi series. It was like, my mind was blowing up with some of the things he was saying. So he watches that stuff closely, let me tell you.
He's an RFR
so I can't wait to hear what he thinks. But next week, we got Steve Sansweet on the show taking live calls. So Tyler will be standing by screening calls. It'll be just like the typical after show. But this time we got Steve Sansweet. We'll be talking Star Wars collectibles and the museum with Steve.
And he's taking requests.
We'll take requests. Yeah, you need to get a close-up look at something. If feasible, we will provide it to you on camera. So I'm really looking forward to that. That's going to be just, that's an honor. And I love to be able to make myself available to help those guys out any way I can. So in addition to going out there and seeing 2 concerts and hiking up a mountain, we'll be doing a live fundraiser for Rancho Obi-Wan. It's going to be a busy week. It's going to be a busy week. I can't wait. Of course, he's got tons of action figures there. And I wonder if he deals with the same problems our buddy Jason Swank deals with them all falling over all the time.
Does he have action figure dominoes going on at Rancho? That would be something.
I got to tell you what, Jason put the call out there for people to provide a solution to his tumbling action figures, the Black Series, right? The 6-inch Black Series figures. Jason is having problems keeping them standing upright and at attention in his collection. And so he put the call out for Rebel Force Radio listeners to provide a solution. And man, you guys flooded our inbox with all these wild solutions for Swank. So have you found one that is going to work for you?
No, I haven't found one. So there's 3 right now that I think have potential to be the solution. And they kind of range, in price. There's sort of like a low rent version. Then there's the Mercedes or BMW version, and then there's kind of a mid-range. This is like the Taurus or the Sable or something. But the low end came from Rebel Force Radio friend Chris B, who runs, I think, the absolute best action figure website on the planet, galacticfigures.net. He also has a great podcast that accompanies it. I was just listening to his breakdown of all the news that came out of San Diego Comic-Con. If you're a Star Wars collector and you just want to, I always say it's like just the facts, ma'am. I mean, Chris, he does provide a lot of context, but it's not a bunch of hyperbole or complaining like, you hear with a lot of these collectors shows. Chris just really gets in there, tells you what you need to know, where you get the figures, when they're going to be released, how much they are. I just love it. I love it. I can't say enough about Chris. So he contacted me and said, I got a solution for you. Glue dots. And what's great about these is that they're super cheap. You can get hundreds of them for, just a couple of bucks. They come in containers like this. And it's sort of that, I used to call it snot glue. You know how you get stuff in the mail and it's like a trifold and it's got some glue on it and you can peel it off and you can kind of, rub it in between your fingers. And
we used to call that stuff rubber cement. Rubber cement. Yeah.
Where were you when you were calling it cement? You were not in Chicago. Calling it cement.
No, I know, but my mom's from northern Mississippi, so we pronounce things in all kind of wacky ways. I was just with her earlier this week, and after 50 years in the Chicago area, her Mississippi accent has only grown stronger. I don't know how that happens.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
But yeah, she says, come out and see me on Tuesday. I said, okay, I'll come out and see you on Tuesday, and I'll bring the rubber cement. So
All right. So
You don't
glue
know.
dots.
You don't wanna know.
This is the
Yeah.
this really is the it's so cheap. So I've got some figures that I've put some glue dots on their feet, and it is great because it doesn't leave any residue on the figure or on whatever stand that you have going on or whatever surface you're standing them on. So that's up there. Then I've got kind of a mid-range, which RFR Patreon and friend of the show, listener Andrew Fields, he reached out and he says, look, I started 3D printing these things myself because I was having similar problems. So he's going to ship some of his 3D printed customized stands out to me so that I can give my honest, I said, dude, I'm going to give my honest feedback because I feel like I've tried them all. And he said, no, I'm going to do it. So he's smart because he's got different stands with different pegs, with different pegs of different lengths, different widths, all that. And then there's the higher end version. And I got this from Big Steve Glosson. Big Steve. Big Steve's one of the, I don't hear from him for months. And then just all of a sudden, bam, here comes Big Steve lighting up my texts. Hey man, I heard you're looking for something going on with them action figures falling over. I got and he was so excited about these action figure stands. So a guy, and I'm not going to plug these until I get my shipment because I don't want to give him any publicity unless I know this is really worth the time and the money of Rebel Force Radio listeners. This guy has created his own version of stands because he collects the Marvel Legends and the Black Series, Star Wars, plus the Playmate Star Trek going back to the 90s, all that. So check this out. He's got these little clear plastic stands, and you actually can pull the pegs out and replace them with pegs of different lengths, different girths. So it's an interchangeable peg system. He's got a small, medium, and large. So you get these stands, and then you get the pegs to insert into the stands. This has a lot of potential, and he claims that pretty much any kind of figure he'll be able to fit. So I ordered some from him, and so maybe next week, well, not next week, maybe we'll do it after the big Rancho show. We'll have a clear, decisive winner. Is it going to be the glue dots? Is it going to be RFR Patreon Andrew Fields 3D printed customizations? Or is it going to be Big Steve's fancy Cadillac of action figure stands? We'll find out in a couple of weeks. But thank you all very much.
I'm at the edge of my seat.
I bet you are.
Hey, as long as we're talking action figures, I got something in the mail. Action figures.
Oh, what do you got?
It's a package from RFR friend Scott Rifen. You know Scott?
Oh yeah, Scott.
You probably met Scott.
Long time listener.
He is RFR friend, and he's a radio personality with iHeart Radio. Where is he? He's somewhere like down in Georgia or someplace. I forget where he's at, but he's a fellow radio guy.
All right.
He sent me something. I think there's two of them in here, one for me and one for you.
What we got?
But Scott, I think he regularly goes to that Disney park in Florida, and I can't tell you how happy I am he sent us these. We each got one of these R2 figures from him.
These.
Droid Factory.
Yep.
R2 W50. And what's great about this is when we were in Anaheim earlier in the summer, I saw this at Star Tours and didn't buy it because I didn't want to carry it around at the park. And I said, I'll just stop and get it on our way out. And naturally, we did not stop to get it. Wow, what a cool looking R2 unit it is.
I love it. He's gold and blue
with gold highlights and silver. And so he's really cool. So I have two of them, one for me and one for eBay.
Scott. That's
one
awesome.
for Swank.
Yeah.
Also, I picked this up. This is a custom figure from Stan Solo.
Oh.
And it is this vac metalized Boba Fett. And it is outrageous.
I saw
amazing.
that. You got one. Whoa.
Yeah,
that's beautiful. Look at that.
It's a great looking action
It's
figure.
the Kenner colors, but all vac metalized in the vintage, it's basically a vintage Boba Fett, But check that out. Look at that backpack. We never had that kind of backpack for the vintage Boba Fett. So 5 points of articulation, vac metallized, and a soft goods cape, and the disintegrator rifle.
Yes.
Wow.
Whoops, which I just dropped. But yeah, it holds it all perfectly. It's derivative of the Kenner scope, the vintage Kenner scope of Boba Fett, but it has some actual upgrades.
Yeah, modern upgrades with that jetpack.
With the jetpack and the viewfinder up on top, if you remember.
Oh, right, of course,
Kenner,
that's right.
It was kind of
have that.
It was kind of molded flush into the top of the helmet. So Stan Solo. Sure, you pay a couple extra bucks for these figures, but, I find that they are probably the most reliable and reputable of any of these custom action figure.
Totally agree.
Guys online. I mean, I've dealt with some good ones. I've dealt with some really, really bad ones too. One of them has $300 of mine and has had it for 2 years, promising me 13 action figures. Only one of them has shown up. So that's been disappointing. And well,
I love this.
I don't run into any of that crap with the Stan Solo brand.
No.
I don't know who you are, Stan, but great job.
Yeah, it's great. I've ordered a ton of stuff from Stan.
Yeah, probably the best of all the fan-made action figures. And I've tried out a bunch of them. Sometimes you get them and they're like 3D printed and they fall apart. And you're really disgusted by it. Other times they're as high quality as anything Kenner or Hasbro has ever put out. And this is definitely an example of that.
So let me ask you, with something like that, Jim, where does it fit in your display? I have a
Boba Fett specific area.
Okay.
Yes.
Like a little Boba Fett themed area of your collection.
Yes. You'll see it when I debut the Star Wars Vault, my new underground location of my collection. And it's been coming together. I have to admit, in the last few weeks, I haven't done much maintenance in the vault, but I am targeting maybe a September bash where, if possible, you could come out and the Bobby Freaks and other local Star Wars notable personalities.
Yeah, I'd love to. That'd be a lot of fun. That'd be a ton of fun.
Yeah. So the action figures are still flowing into the house, despite all my efforts to quit collecting. It just never took hold. And it never will.
Did you ever really quit?
Will. And so just having a lot of fun with collecting. And so I'm really psyched to be going out to Rancho Obi-Wan for next Tuesday's live stream. And we hope you all listen, watch, call in, and most importantly, throw a buck or two toward Rancho Obi-Wan. Why not? Everything's been perfect over there. Where things have not been perfect lately is Spotify lately. Spotify, if you listen to Rebel Force Radio on Spotify over the past
What's going on?
We've received all kind of weird complaints. And I always say, Spotify, yep. That's who's doing it. I hear things like segments repeating themselves. Like you'll hear 2 minutes of the show and then 2 minutes of the show again.
Really?
Sometimes we're sped up. Sometimes we're slowed down. Sometimes we're very slow. It's like, or somebody even told me Jason's voice is slow and distorted. You sound fine. I'm like, well,
I don't even know how that would be possible, because I happen to know that it's one audio file that gets uploaded to all these platforms. Like, it's almost like they have to be trying to make it sound weird.
Yeah, and I haven't been able to get to the bottom of it. I have some inquiries out there, but it's kind of a mystery, and it's inconsistent. It's inconsistent.
Welcome to Rebel Force Radio. You're listening to Spotify.
Yeah, so I'm sure I'll be getting some emails about that. But I'm telling you guys, I was really concerned about it, and then I discovered that everyone who has been complaining saying it's coming from Spotify. So I don't know what to tell you. You know, maybe reach out to Spotify. I
bet it's not happening to Rogan.
Yeah, right. Probably not. But I've heard people saying it's been occurring with other podcasts they listen to. Okay. So because naturally my first inclination was like, well, this is pilot error. Clearly, I screwed something up. But no, retracing my tracks and everything, I think this is specifically a Spotify issue.
Yeah.
So, if it's causing you a headache, try us out on another platform like Apple Podcasts or something like that. We're on like 150 of them.
Oh my God,
I don't think there is a podcast platform.
We run through them all at the end of every show. So yeah, there's plenty to choose from. But I know, some people, they've got, I'm an Apple Music guy, so I always use Apple Podcasts. I use Apple Music. So people kind of pick their favorites, and some people are really in that Spotify world. But yeah, that's a weird one. That's a real.
It is acting weird, yeah. So we're aware of the issue. So stop emailing us.
All right. Before we get into the Cantina with Brian, we're going to take a look at some headlines coming up right now.
I have good news for you, my lord.
That's good news. Come closer, I have good news.
All right, we have been covering the Icons Unearthed Star Wars documentary anthology series airing on Vice. They've been dropping weekly, and we're up to episode 3 out of 6 episodes that are planned for the series. Later on in the program, we'll be joined by the director of that series, Brian Volk-Weiss. But for now, let's get through some highlights. Jim, I mean, you're one of those guys that's seen every documentary about the making of Star Wars. You've read every book. You've flipped through every magazine since 1977. But every once in a while with this series, you get that little nugget that you hadn't heard before. So what are some highlights from episode 3?
I always think it's really interesting to chart the evolution of Darth Vader becoming Luke's father, Anakin Skywalker. That's been really interesting. As a matter of fact, in some of the earlier drafts for Star Wars, there were multiple Sith Lords, not just Darth Vader. He was part of a gang, It wasn't until George started really paring things down and he put all of the elements of the other Sith Lords into Darth Vader. He even jettisoned the Sith along with the Sith Lords. You don't even hear the word Sith mentioned in the original trilogy, which is kind of funny to think about. We were aware of the word because there were t-shirts and posters out there that said Dark Lord of the Sith. They were Darth Vader shirts. And so we knew that Vader had this kind of regal title, but we never really knew what it was. And George Lucas clearly did not intend for Darth Vader to be Luke Skywalker's father when he was shooting the original Star Wars. Everybody looks at Ben Kenobi and they're like, oh, you could tell he's really mulling over what to say to Luke and all that. No, it's really the acting Alec Guinness was doing at that moment wasn't trying to figure out a way to sugarcoat the truth. He was dropping a big bombshell on Luke about this guy, Darth Vader, who killed Luke's father. What kid wants to hear about a dude who killed his father? That's big info to drop on young Luke. And so Ben was being hesitant, let's just say. But now we look at it with different eyes. We look at it in retrospect, and
it works.
The way that the story is shifted and changed, it does work. It does. He does that kind of. Ben kind of seems very hesitant to tell Luke the truth about his father, and seems to find the best way to tell him in a split second. It's like, oh, he's hiding the fact that Luke is Darth Vader's son.
So what you're saying is that the hesitancy in the delivery
was even there
by Alec Guinness.
It was all just, yeah.
We're reading into that, or do you think there actually was some coaching on set to, by George Lucas to make this feel somewhat? Was George? I guess was there any chance that George was giving himself some leeway with this?
I don't think so.
No,
I don't think so. I think he meant it to be pretty straightforward, to give Darth Vader a more menacing quality, knowing that Darth Vader killed the protagonist's father, a father that Luke seemed to look up to and stuff, from, without even knowing him. But so in reality, though, George just hadn't figured out that was the twist he wanted to throw into the story. And after Star Wars came and went and Darth Vader became this huge pop culture sensation and everything, he had the pieces for the sequel, and he had Lee Brackett, based on his story outline. Lee Brackett put out the first script for Empire Strikes Back. And George never, according to George, he never told Lee that Vader was the father of Luke.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, why would he hold back such an important piece of information?
To his writer.
Yeah, to the writer of the script of the film. And then he gets the script back and is disappointed there's not some big plot twist in there or anything. Unfortunately, Lee Brackett passed away shortly after she turned in the script.
Wow.
So George now has got the script and he's got no script writer. And this is when Marcia Lucas's recollections come into play. And she tells a story about the conception of Vader as Luke's father that I've never heard before. I've never heard this before. And reading through all the books and everything, it seemed like George had this idea, but was hesitant to incorporate it into Star Wars or Empire at first. But it wasn't until Lee Brackett died, when his back was up against the wall, and he said, I have to do this myself. And so that's when he came up with the Vader twist. But that's not really how it happened, according to Marcia Lucas. So here's her recollection of how Vader was conceived to be Luke Skywalker's father.
He had Willard and Gloria Hike. They were good social friends of ours. They were co-writers on American Graffiti, and then they came in and did a dialogue polish on Star Wars. And they were up in our kitchen. And George said, I got the sequel, now I'm working on the sequel. And Willard laughed and said, well, you can always make Darth Vader Luke's father. I kid you not. I kid you not. That just struck a note with George. I don't know that Willard even remembers saying that, but I remember it.
Wow. Bombshell. Bombshell. Willard Hayek.
Right.
Perhaps the architect of one of the biggest plot twists in cinema history. I am your father. Wow.
George was giving him food in the kitchen, and Willard was giving George food for thought. Now, like a lot of my real grasp of the making of Star Wars, beyond things like documentaries called The Making of Star Wars, was this book that came out in the 90s, the annotated screenplay.
Oh, yeah.
Jason, you and me, we've talked about this a lot of times.
This is mandatory reading.
Mm-hmm.
You have to read it.
Great book, Star Wars, the annotated screenplays by Laurent Bozareau. And it came out in, like I said, in the mid-90s? What's the year? 97. I remember when this came out. I thought it was a bombshell of a book.
The 20th anniversary.
And in this book, it really breaks down how things were conceived and how they evolved into what we see in the Star Wars films. This is where I discovered that Gloria Katz and Willard Hayek wrote a lot of the dialogue for the original Star Wars, like the real punchy kind of character-driven stuff, a lot of the real famous lines given to the characters. These guys kind of came up with, and that's where I first heard of those two, really. Yeah. Now, they're co-screenwriters on American Graffiti. Mm-hmm. And, they were all tight. These Bay Area filmmakers all kind of kept together in this tight circle. And so it was Willard Hayek who gave George the idea, hey, you can make Darth Vader Luke's father. But according to the annotated screenplay, George says, I didn't discuss the notion of Vader being Luke's father with Lee Brackett. At that point, I wasn't sure if I was going to include it in that script or reveal it in the third episode. I was going back and forth, and rather than confuse things for Lee, I decided to keep the whole issue out of the mix. I figured I would add it later on. All right, well, that kind of adds up, I mean,
sure.
George wasn't sure if he wanted Vader to be the father in this one or that one.
It doesn't invalidate Marcia's story.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. The notion of Vader, this is from the book, the annotated screenplays. The notion of Vader being Luke's father first appeared in the second draft. Vader became attracted to the dark side while he was training to become a Jedi, yada, yada, yada. We know the story.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where it all kind of comes into reality here in the script writing process. And Lawrence Kasdan, who was then brought in to write the script after he turned in the Raiders of the Lost Ark script that George liked so much, George said, "Hey, why don't you take a shot at Empire? Because my script writer passed away." He says, when we started to work on Empire, George said Darth was Luke's father. I thought it was really cool. Writing their confrontation was difficult because yada, yada. But so he says, when we started work, so that's after Lee Brack. So the hike thing must have happened after the first draft was completed.
Right.
Because now, so he's not holding back now when it comes to Kasdan. And he's saying, oh, yeah, Darth is Luke's father. He's not worried about confusing Kasdan.
Right.
Lucas is convinced that he needs to put that into the final script. But again, maybe it was just by reading Lee Brackett's script and realizing that there was no real big twist. Then he said,
right. That's what I'm thinking. He gets the script back from Lee Brackett. There's no big aha moment. There's no big, he knows that this is the second act in a 3-act story. That there's nothing to, there's no cliffhanger going into the third act, and I think you need that. And so they're having some wine, they're having some food in the Lucas kitchen, and it sounds like the way Marcia says it, it was just almost like delivered in jest, like, well, if all else fails, George, you can always make Darth Vader Luke's father.
Right.
Yeah, and then, wow, little did he know.
Well, and also Marcia says that Willard Hike probably doesn't remember saying this, which means she knows he doesn't remember this. She wouldn't say that if she didn't say to him years later.
To prove me wrong on this because he doesn't remember.
Remember when you told George to make Darth the father?
No, I don't remember that at all.
Well, you said it.
No, I was so up that I don't remember any of that.
Well,
I had so many glasses of wine.
He remembered. So that's what's happening there with.
Wow.
I think it's a great story.
It is a great story. And sometimes those things, those little conversations, those little moments lead to big revelations and big things. To me, it wouldn't take anything away from George as a storyteller or filmmaker or anything if that ended up being the truth.
Well, also it shows that George, despite being at times allergic to collaboration and like taking in outside ideas, it seems like he was much more malleable and much more open-minded back when he was younger. I mean, of course, success builds walls and he's up in the tower then all of a sudden, but back then, he was still, even despite the success of American Graffiti and Star Wars, he was still really on the hook to the studio. It was Empire Strikes Back. He was funding the whole thing. He was going down the Francis Ford Coppola road to insanity. And if you ever see any of the documentaries featuring Coppola, he's always on the phone pacing, saying he's going to lose everything, What do you mean they took the helicopters away? Well, he's just like, he always seems like on the verge
of a total breakdown. The film's going to collapse. He's going to be penniless. Yeah.
But something tells me that kind of thing sort of fuels Coppola, It's almost like he embraces those situations. George Lucas is not that kind of guy.
Yeah.
George Lucas wants everything to be nice and tidy and organized and stuff.
I think Coppola thrives on the chaos.
Yeah, right. And I think George likes the organization. And that's why, George, I heard him say this once at the Four Seasons back in 2009. He said that the reason he devoted so much time, energy, and money into developing technologies to make filmmaking easier is because he was just a lazy guy and didn't want the stress of having to deal with all the problems that come with making a film. And he was just trying to find a way to make it easier.
I mean, isn't it true that probably all the great inventors it was all laziness?
Yes.
I think all innovation stems from laziness. I don't want to go outside to go to the bathroom. I'm going to actually make a seat with a hole in my house. with pipes and stuff to send all my stuff out front.
I'm tired of taking 2 days to go visit my relatives on a horse.
Yes.
I'm going to make a car. That'll make things easier for me.
So I don't have to feed
everyone
the
is
car.
trying to just make things easier.
Right.
So that is the father of all innovation.
Laziness.
We got one more clip from Icons Unearthed, and then I believe that Brian Volk-Weiss will be joining us in the cantina. But this is a clip of Howard Kazanjian talking about how Marcia Lucas may have helped get Carrie Fisher back on the wagon.
Ooh.
The performance that she was giving and the look in dailies wasn't working. George said, Howard, you better talk to her. Well, that's real tough for a guy like me to say, clean up your act, get off drugs. You look terrible. I went to Marcia and I told her exactly what George had asked me to do. And she said, I'll handle it. She said, get the footage and put it in the projection room. And she sat with Carrie Fisher alone. I can hear her saying, you look like and she cleaned up her act right away, and we went back and reshot.
Wow. So we're talking Empire Strikes Back at this point.
Yeah.
And there's something about those behind the scenes photos of Carrie at Empire. She's just so cute in those pictures. But apparently she was doing a lot of stuff, and it was Marcia Lucas that actually had to have the. It would be hard, I think, for for a man to sit a young Carrie Fisher down and give her a what for on how she looks. But Marcia, it seems like Marcia had the better play. I'm going to sit her down. I'm going to show her the footage. You want to look like this? Is this what you want?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Not really. Not really. She was probably high as a kite when that was happening too.
Yeah, you look like a horse's rear end.
A baboon ass.
Baboon ass.
Baboon ass.
Remember Carrie? That's what Carrie said her hair looked like in The Force Awakens.
The Force Awakens at the end when she's wearing that like blue dress.
Yeah.
The
Maybe
braids.
that's where she got baboon ass from.
Yeah.
Was did I hear Brian?
I believe Brian's joining us. Yeah.
All
Brian's
right.
joining
Let's
us
get him
here.
in here. Talk a little Icons Unearthed.
All right.
With the director himself.
Fantastic. Hello, Brian.
How you doing?
Good, man.
Hey,
How
Brian.
about you?
I'm all right. Good to see you.
Oh, great to see you, man. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, this is a thrill to talk to you. I'm such a fan. I'm Jason, by the way, and that's Jimmy.
Thank you.
Such
Nice
a
to meet
fan of
you.
your work. I mean, from the toys that made us. I mean, I never thought any serious filmmaker would actually make a documentary series. I mean, one episode, let alone a series about various toy lines. But not only did you do it, but you did it. It was like a big success. It was one of those COVID binge shows that you had to watch.
Thank you, man. Very kind. Very kind.
And so we know that you're a fan, you're a collector, and you're one of us. I think the word geek is overused. I'm not a big fan of that, but you're an enthusiast. But you kind of.
Listen, if you don't want to be called a geek, that's cool, and I respect that. But I am absolutely a motherfucking geek. Can I curse? Am I allowed to curse?
You're allowed to curse, man. Anything you want.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
right.
a geek. I'm definitely a geek, and I'm proud of it. But I respect if you don't want to be called that. I will not call you a geek.
No, I think it's just overused sometimes. That's all. But
That's true.
we're geeking out about Icons Unearthed. I mean, an anthology documentary series about the making of Star Wars episodes 1 through 6, or should we say 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3. And as a huge Star Wars fan, and we'll talk about your fandom in a little bit, I can't imagine you going and pitching something new about the making of Star Wars and not seeing eyes roll like, oh my gosh, hasn't every story been told about the making of these films? So how did you get people excited about something new when it comes to, documenting the making of probably the most well-documented films of all time?
So, I mean, you asked me a direct question. I'm going to give you a direct answer, but I hate saying this kind of thing because I always feel like it could come off as egotistical know, but you asked a question, I'm going to give you an answer. Movies that made us, in particular, like many times we'll hear, wait, who are you? And we're like, well, we do movies that made us and toys. And they're like, oh my God, movies that made us. It's my favorite show. When can I do my interview? So we get a lot of that, luckily. And then the other answer is, because obviously we did this kind of thing before movies that made us, you just got to be passionate, dig in, be respectful, but be passionate, and maybe don't accept the first no you hear. Second no will never bother anyone again. But you gotta be polite, but you also have to be persistent.
Did you have an angle, though? Did you go in and say, I think we've got a different angle on this particular story?
So there's the before we got Marcia Lucas, and there's the after we got Marcia Lucas. Before Marcia Lucas, it was, please trust us, please trust us. And after Marcia Lucas, it was, we got Marcia. And they were like, what? Bullshit. We're like, no, here's the picture. They're like, oh, okay. Well, yeah, I'll do it. Like Howard Kazanjian, I don't know if he does the show without her. So as one example.
Interesting.
Wow.
And she was most recently featured in his book. And that was probably the most we've ever heard Marcia Lucas talk about Star Wars prior to Icons Unearthed. But of course, this was all transcribed onto a page, and we're not seeing her on camera, actually hearing the words come out of her mouth. But was it through Kazanjian that you were able to nab Marcia? What was the evolution of you getting her to sit down in front of camera?
It was, believe it or not, it was through Ken Ralston. He interviewed him before. Yeah. We had interviewed him before a few times for other shows. And after the interview, he's literally like taking his mic off. And by the way, what I'm describing to you, I mean, this happens a lot more than you may think. He's taking his mic off and he's like, who are you trying to get? And we were like, Marcia. And he's like, well, who are you talking to? And we're like, we gave him the names and he was like, no, you got to go through her assistant. And he gave us her assistant's name and number. Took about 2 weeks of back and forth. And then it's funny, I woke up one morning and I was supposed to be flying to New York at 3:00. And I got an email saying that she had said yes. And she's in Hawaii. And she was available, quote, tomorrow and for the next 9 days.
Wow.
And in this line of business, with someone like her, you don't fuck around with the 9 days part.
No.
I canceled my trip to New York, and at 2:00, I mean, that was like 30 meetings and crap that had to be rescheduled and pushed back 6 weeks. Literally flew to Hawaii at 2:00, and I was in her house about 18 hours after I landed. For 6 hours, by the way, 6-hour interview.
Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is her first on-camera interview and only her second interview ever about Star Wars in 45 years, right?
As far as we can, I hate saying absolutes with stuff like that because then someone will be like, in 1982. But according to her and according to staggering amounts of Googling, because I don't want to get that 1982 comment, yes, this was her first ever on-camera interview.
Wow. Kudos to you, man, because that was a real get, as you know, a real get.
Not to be cheesy, but I really feel compelled to respond to you by saying I am part of a team. Obviously, doing interviews like this would be hard to do with everybody sitting here together. So I'm the face of that team, but we don't get her without that team.
Yeah.
What do you think the biggest roadblock is for people who have attempted to interview her in the past? Is it George? Is it something? Did she ever have an agreement with George not to talk? What's the deal?
No, absolutely not. Listen, I can't speak for probably thousands of other filmmakers, but if I had to guess, and this is only a guess, we have a full-time research team. We have a full-time casting team. Like, we have resources that, a guy or a girl working out of their garage, or, I don't care if it's a $10 million house, the garage is like, there's only so much you can do as an independent. So because we have full-time people doing certain jobs for us, you have resources that not everybody has.
Makes sense.
I think I'm beginning to follow you a little bit here, because I thought your resource was Ken Ralston, but it sounds like there was maybe a little something to sweeten the deal.
No, we didn't pay her a penny.
No. Okay. All right. So you got a good research crew, and you got Ken Ralston giving you the tips. But I mean, somebody had to have been able to get to Marcia Lucas over all of these years, and she's been resistant to appear on camera. So I was just wondering if there was ever any reason given why this is her first on-screen interview.
I'll be completely honest with you. I did ask her that.
Yeah.
But I don't remember what she said.
No. My God.
I'm 99.9% sure. Listen, dude, it was a 6-hour interview.
Yeah. And you were there, right? You were there. You're the director of the series. Were you there? You were the one asking the questions.
I was literally sitting 6 feet away from her.
Yeah. Yeah.
In her house. Does she have any Star Wars stuff in the house?
Nothing.
Nothing.
One.
Not even a poster, huh?
Yeah. By the way, this I do remember. I asked her that, and she has a couple houses, and I said to her, and I asked her that. I go, "There's nothing Star Wars here. Do you have any Star Wars anywhere?" And she says she has one of the original posters framed, and I believe she said her LA house, and that's it.
Wow. Well, Brian, we've only been able to see the first 3 episodes of 6 episodes in the series. We've already been treated to a lot of cool stories that we've never heard, despite being total, geeks on this sort of thing, and watching all these documentaries and reading all these books and through the magazines. What do you think, though, having met the woman, what do you think is her biggest contribution to Star Wars, Marcia Lucas?
I think, and again, I could spend an hour answering this question, but if I were to reduce it to one simple answer, I think that the way the script was written, the movie was directed, and the editing was being done, she humanized everything. Like, I think it was her that made someone I was 1 when the movie came out, but I got into it when I was 5.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I wanted to be Luke Skywalker because to me, he seemed real. Like, I wanted to join the rebellion because of him, and Leia, of course, and Han, right. But she made them real. And if you don't mind a spoiler alert, in Return of the Jedi, she was not very involved with it for a bunch of reasons, including the fact that the marriage was starting to end. But they were about to lock the cut, and they knew it wasn't really working. And they gave it to Marcia. And I'm taking this answer and I'm applying it to A New Hope as much as I am Return of the Jedi. What she told us she did was, and she used this as one example, Mark Hamill was directed to be angry the whole movie. Like, Marcad didn't get the characters. So Marcad is like angry, angry, angry. So he turned in this performance, basically, that was not the Luke Skywalker we grew up with. And she watched the cut. She instantly realized that. So it's interesting. All the people who had worked on it for years before her didn't see that. She saw it. And then she basically locked herself in an editing bay for a week and went through every single take Mark Hamill did and found the softest take. And when he started even getting angry in a soft take, she would cut to Yoda or she would cut to Vader and literally hid the misdirecting that Marquand had done. So I'm using that as an example, but I think that applies to A New Hope as well. As you know, because you've seen the episode, the Force was about to be cut out.
Yeah.
In fact, the Force was cut out. She put it back in. So think about what Star Wars is without the Force. It's like any other science fiction action movie.
And that
the
was
Force,
Brian De Palma that was riding George so hard after that screening about the Force, right?
He gets the most bad rap for that, but it was pretty much everybody but Spielberg.
Yeah.
And so Marcia was the one who was sitting there watching the cut and was like, if we're making this movie, let's make this movie. Like, it doesn't matter if Brian De Palma don't get it.
Yeah.
And the example she used, which I think is in the episode, one of the problems with making shows like this is you're watching 1,000 cuts and then you every cut gets shorter and you kind of forget what made it in or not. But I'm pretty sure this is in the episode where the thing that made her the most upset was when Han, right before they go on the final battle, Han's line, "May the Force be with you." Think about Han Solo's character without that moment.
Yep.
Because I never did until she brought it up. Without that moment, Han Solo is the exact same person at the end of the movie that he was at the beginning of the movie. That line shows him evolving.
Yes.
And subconsciously, that's what we as movie viewers want to see.
Right.
Yeah.
Always. We want to see character growth.
Example. Yeah.
We want to see character growth. We want to see them evolve, as you say. Hearing you talk about the angry Luke in Return of the Jedi brings back this idea Mark Hamill had for how he thought it would be cool for Return of the Jedi to end, because he felt like it was all just tied up with a nice little bow, and he wanted something maybe to carry it into the proposed next 3 films. And so he wanted to kill Vader and then put on Vader's helmet and say, "Now I'm the Dark Lord." And that was a Hamill idea, obviously he pitched it to George and everything, but I can't help but wonder if maybe it was some of this direction from Richard Marquand to bring out more anger in Luke that might have even sort of pushed Hamill to suggesting that. I don't know, but I found that to be very interesting.
I think I agree with you. It's very interesting. I also think it is a horrible idea. That's what I call it.
Yeah. Hey, I'm just trying to.
No, I'm not.
I always felt that idea from
Um,
Hamill was too much. It was just too much. It would make Luke into an entirely different character, and it would send the Star Wars story into this cycle where it's repeating itself. Luke then needs to be redeemed and all of this, and I just don't think it would work at all myself.
First of all, maybe I'm in the minority. I got no problems with tying things up with a nice bow. First of all. Second of all, it's what I call a Terminator 3. That ending cost that movie $50 to $100 million. That I will never forget. The whole movie, the audience, you could feel, whoa, this is great. And then the movie ends with the end of civilization shown pretty distinctly and clearly. And then you're sitting there in the lobby and everybody's depressed. I'm pretty sure we would not be talking about Star Wars right now if it ended. I'm always interested in context and a control experiment. I love the black hole. I love it. No one's interviewing me about the black hole in 2022.
That's funny.
That's what you have to look at. Don't just look at successes. Look at why did it succeed versus all the failures? And that to me, and again, I don't remember seeing A New Hope or Empire Strikes Back in the theaters, but I'm 46. I vividly remember seeing Return of the Jedi. And listen, do I know Empire Strikes Back is the best of the original three? Yes, I do. Am I aware that Return of the Jedi probably has the most problems of the original three? Yes, I am. Do I still love Return of the Jedi with passion
Amazing.
that I do not have Empire Strikes Back? Yes. Do I know the Ewoks are cheesy? Yes. Do I know they were connected to selling toys? Yes. Does it bother me at all? No. I don't care.
I'm with you, man. I'm 45, and yes, I feel the same way. I always say that Return of the Jedi is my sentimental favorite. My intellectual favorite is obviously Empire. Now Max got a few years on us, so he was at the right age for that first film in '77. So he got that moment with the Star Destroyer going overhead, and it changed his life. For me, I always say to Jim, my cantina moment was Jabba's palace. My Star Destroyer flying overhead was Vader coming, down in the Imperial shuttle. When you're 5 years old, that makes quite an impact.
You want to do a little show and tell?
Sure. Show us all your Ewok crap.
I don't know. My groomsmen for my wedding commissioned this painting. Hold on.
All right. So he's going to go get this painting.
Ryan took off
to prove what a fan of the.
He's got a bunch of what looks like concept art behind him.
I know. We can find out what the next project is going to be.
Right.
Keep looking. We were trying to snoop on your board there behind you. We were going to figure out what your next project was.
Yeah, I think that's all God willing public. All right. How many Ewoks do you think were in this painting?
How many Ewoks in the painting?
Yeah.
Oh my God. I don't know. I haven't seen the painting.
How many Ewoks can you fit into a painting? That's the question.
It's a trick question.
Okay.
How many Ewoks? Well, it's a picture of Luke on board the.
That is the moment
on board the Death Star.
And
he's
Brian. I'm not just saying this because I'm a fan of yours, but I think that we're brothers from another mother, because that for me is the quintessential moment. In fact, I have my Black Series Luke Skywalker action figure in that pose, looking down at his mechanical hand. The moment that he realizes that if he doesn't change his path, he's going to be the next Darth Vader. That's the moment of realization. He looks at that hand, and you can hear the mechanics of the hand as he's, kind of running his fingers and making that fist. Huge moment.
It's my favorite moment in all of Star Wars. My number one absolute favorite. And it always has been. But as you get older, you start to think why is that always and what I basically realized is every single one of us has our demons.
Mm-hmm.
Some people have an alcohol problem. Some people have a temper. Some people do drugs. Some people are too insecure or shy. And to me, that moment represents, I'm literally getting emotional. It represents coming to terms with your flaw.
Yeah.
And doing something about it.
Right. And saying no.
Yeah. And walking away from your flaw. And by the way, as you know, it's not like he's sitting there in a restaurant being like, you know what? I'm not going to become a Sith. He literally throws it away knowing he's going to die.
Life and death. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. He didn't know. So he's throwing it away in a very difficult moment.
Yeah.
Where he put his, I mean, I guarantee you, if you could have asked him before he did that, what do you think the odds are you're going to survive throwing away your lightsaber with the fucking Emperor 2 feet away? He would have said 0. I'm committing suicide on purpose because I don't want to become a Sith.
Right.
And so he did it when it mattered.
Yes.
That's what I love about it. And he confronted his weakness.
And that shot is just telegraphed and foreshadowed with that line from Alec Guinness, more machine than man, twisted and evil. And Luke looks at his hand and he's hearing that line come back from Alec Guinness, from Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I mean, as an audience, we all recognize what's happening there too. There's such a clarity about that moment for us as viewers, where there's nothing left to be questioned after seeing what happens at that moment. So I don't think anybody's ever really talked much about that particular scene in Return of the Jedi on this show. And we've been doing this show for 16 years.
Oh, wow.
But I don't recall anyone ever really addressing that moment. And maybe I just take it for granted after all these years. But you're right. It is such an impactful character moment. Beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I literally had to use mental tricks while talking to you to not start crying. Yeah. Like,
wow.
It affects. Again, that's why they fucking made a painting. Like,
right. It
is a very important. And by the way, I mean, like I said, we all have our own flaws.
Sure.
Whenever I'm confronting my flaw that I'm the most trying to contain, I think of that, and it helps me with the process of not doing a line of coke. Kidding.
That's what great mythology and great stories do. They inspire us. They hold up the ideal, and we hold ourselves up to that ideal. And I got to ask, you got 6 parts, and you're covering episodes 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3. I'm so excited to get into the prequel era. I really am. What about the transition from George to Disney? Are you telling in so many ways George's story, George's journey, or do you have plans at some point to maybe continue this on? There is a sequel trilogy. There's more Star Wars. What's your take on that? And would you ever consider, covering it as a documentary filmmaker?
Well, let me start with this. This company only does shows about things we love.
Mm-hmm. I know where this is going.
So do
I.
Stop. Let me
sugarcoating.
So again, I don't want to talk about what I don't like, but this is what I would say. If we were to make more, it would be about The Force Awakens, Rogue One, and Clone Wars. Honorable mention for Rebels.
I see.
That's it.
What about Mandalorian?
So that's interesting. I could do Mandalorian. Because I love Mandalorian. And you're right. If we were to do this, which we're not, but if we were, we would do Mandalorian. You're absolutely right. And again, this is probably going to annoy a lot of people, but I like Boba Fett, but it is the most bizarre thing in the world to me that they took this guy with 7 lines and have built a world out of it. And in the same way, I'm the biggest Trekkie, but I don't get, and I really I'm not a Klingon guy. Like anytime there's Klingon episodes, I don't watch those more than once. That's kind of how I feel about the whole Mandalorian thing, where I'm like,
they are the Klingons in a way of the Star Wars universe. You're absolutely right. I never thought of that before.
Like apples to apples, story-wise, they have nothing in common.
Right.
But what they do have in common is both things took the 89th lead and made it the first lead.
Yeah.
And it and again, tied with Empire Strikes Back on the quality level, the last 4 episodes of Clone Wars. And obviously, that's massively involving Mandalorian storylines and plots and cultures and characters. And And I love Bo-Katan. Like, I get it. I don't know her name, but the girl with the braids on her forehead, I love her. Like, I do like it. By the way, much more than the Klingons. But I'm still, I don't, like Rogue One, I watch that once a year. The last 4 episodes of Clone Wars, I watch that once a year. Force Awakens, I probably watch about every 18 months. But I just can't plug into Mandalorian the same way. And I love it. I love it. I know it's great. I've seen every episode. 2 episodes I've watched twice. And of course, one of them is the episode everyone hates, but it's my favorite, the one with the fucking spiders. I
heard somebody today saying that was their favorite episode.
I love that episode. Fucking ground, like on the ground X-Wings just lighting up the spider. Like, it's the greatest Star Wars.
But do you have the action figure, Brian? Do you have the action figure?
Absolutely. Absolutely. By the way, it's on my toy collection. Here's an interesting, this is a good way to make my point. Hold on a second. I got a call at 6:30. I'm going to push back. Sorry. Hold on.
Oh, no, it's all right. Honored that you're pushing off the call. No, it is not live.
This is live. You can cut this out. But what do you call it? So here's a great way to say this differently. If you look at my toy collection, you would think I'm lying with what I got. Mandalorian shit everywhere. Like I got the Pulse. I got the what do you call it? The what's the ship? What's the ship called?
The Razor Crest.
I got the Razor Crest. By the way, I bought it before it blew up. But anyway, I guess we all did. Yeah. But here's what's interesting. I have every single version of Bo-Katan that has been made, I think. I have every single version of what's her name that got fired off the show. I got every single
Gina
version
Carano,
of
right.
Yeah. I got one Mandalorian.
Wow, so you love all these supporting characters in that Mandalorian universe, but Mando himself, you're just like,
But again, like the character is evolving. But like, here's another way to put it. Like, I love music. Everybody loves music. I always love when people are like, I'm a real music. I'm like, no one doesn't listen to music. But anyway, I'm a lyric guy. Okay. Like if they're like Leonard Cohen, my wife, she thinks that's the worst kind of music ever made. And she'll tell you he's got a horrible voice, which is true. The music in the background ain't that special, which is true. But he writes Pulitzer Prize winning lyrics.
Yeah.
Not literally, but he should.
I know what you mean. Yeah, he should be.
Boba doesn't talk. Mando doesn't talk. And that's like what I need. So I'm a big quote guy. Like I'm a big like plot guy. Like I love that stuff. And he's kind of like the quiet bounty hunter, which is what he is.
Where do you stand on Chewie and R2?
Chewie? I got one. I have the original Chewie I had when I was a kid. I got the first Black Series they made, though I do have a great Chewie prototype of the Black Series. So I guess 3. But you obviously understand what I'm saying because like I get Chewie's a great character. I don't understand the people that are obsessed with Chewie. R2-D2 I love, and I got a million different R2-D2s, but like again, like I'm a Princess Leia guy, I'm an Ahsoka Tano guy, I'm a Han Solo guy, like, and Luke and Ahsoka are my 2 favorite characters because, as we said earlier, you see them evolving.
Yes.
I don't know how much Chewie is evolved.
I want to come back to the Ahsoka thing because I have heard that you're a big Ahsoka fan, but I also have heard.
And by the way, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I really need to say this.
Yes.
And you can go on Instagram and you can prove this on Instagram. I was an Ahsoka fan like fucking 12 years ago. Like, I'm
before
not
anybody, before she was cool, right?
Way before she was cool. So I just want to put that out there. Anyway,
No,
sorry to interrupt.
we had Ashley Eckstein on the show regularly when Ahsoka debuted, and really, my take on fandom at that time was they did not like Ahsoka, and they didn't like the Clone Wars when it debuted. They didn't like the movie, and the first season was a real slow burn. I don't think it was until Clone Wars reached Netflix when people started really giving it a chance. And so we were on the front lines of all that stuff. We saw the same stuff you were seeing. There was a lot of pushback towards Ahsoka Tano in those early days.
Yeah, but I would argue the first season for sure, and the second season to a certain extent, they're not that good. I always liked her because, very similar to Luke, this was someone struggling with her path. Dark versus light, Sith versus Jedi. So I always kind of liked her for that reason. But the moment where I fell in love with her is, and again, you'll notice there's a theme to what I'm into, which I'm sure is true for everybody, but the moment where Clone Wars became Clone Wars and the moment where Ahsoka became Ahsoka is, I believe, the end of season. Which is the season that ends on the planet where they're trying to kill everybody and she teams up with the other kids? It's like a jungle planet. The boss aliens.
That would be that was at the end of season 3. The second half of season 3, things really took off, especially once they got Ahsoka out of the tube top and put some real clothes on her. And then all of a sudden you could take the character seriously.
Well, A, yes. B, the moment for me where everything clicked was, I don't know if you remember this or not, because it was super subtle. After they get back to Coruscant, they're getting off the dropship, and Anakin and Mace and Yoda are waiting for them. They have a bunch of chit chat. I literally just got goosebumps thinking about it. And then Anakin and Ahsoka walk into the building, and you see Mace and Yoda give each other a look. And that instantly changed the prequel era. Because what that moment did, it immediately eliminated the biggest problem with the prequels that existed since the minute George decided to do prequels and not sequels. We know the ending. No one talks about this with the prequels as a problem. It is the biggest problem with the prequels. No one ever talks about it, and I don't know why. The whole point of good storytelling is hide the ending as long as possible and make sure it makes sense. So the minute we sat down to watch Phantom Menace, we knew that cute kid was not going to be cute at the end of 3 movies. What that moment with Mace and Yoda did was it shifted the story from Anakin, where we knew the ending, to Ahsoka, where we didn't know her ending. And we didn't know until Mandalorian if she became Sith or Jedi. So the rest of Clone Wars to me had that will she, won't she turn to the dark side, which is what we were watching with Luke in Empire and Jedi, and to a certain extent, even though we didn't know it at the time, in A New Hope as well. So that to me is the moment. If I were to get a painting for my 10-year wedding anniversary, which ironically is in about 2 weeks, that painting would be of that moment where you see Mace and Yoda looking at each other in profile and in the background, because basically what you realize at that moment is Mace and Yoda, they get it. They fucked up. This kid is not going to have a happy ending. And you realize they are now betting everything on Ahsoka to get him back on track.
Wow.
And that's, to me, what I always say, that moment upped every one of the prequels a full letter grade. So I probably thought Phantom Menace was a C-. After that, it became a B-. Clone Wars went from a B- to an A-. Let's not go crazy. B+. And then Revenge of the Sith, that went from a B+ to an A+.
Wow.
Because it changed everything, that one look.
Wow. You know, for me, what the Clone Wars has done is established the relationship between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker. So when you hear, you know, the Alec Guinness version of Obi-Wan talk about, and he was a good friend, and he's very, you know, sentimental about that, it's finally the fulfillment of that. And but so I've never really looked at it through what you're suggesting here, through the Ahsoka character in that sense. Very, very cool.
Yeah.
Gonna have to.
A lot of people have mentioned over the years to us that the Clone Wars series definitely did enhance their appreciation of the story being told in the prequels. It sounds like that's exactly what happened to you.
That's 100%. Though I will say, I mean, I didn't, especially for my age, I never hated the prequels. Like, I recognized there were some flaws, but I never hated them. So I wasn't the typical 30-something-year-old at the time that hated them. But I will defend this to my dying day. The last 4 episodes of Clone Wars are equal in every sense to Empire Strikes Back in terms of quality of storytelling and quality of everything. I think it is one of, without a doubt, the most gut-wrenchingly powerful moments in cinema, not just Star Wars.
Wow.
I'm talking about a stupid cartoon.
Have you ever told Dave Filoni this, Brian? Have you ever?
No, unfortunately, the few times I've met him, there have been a lot of other people in the room.
Yeah.
But the moment, I mean, I'm literally like getting emotional again. The moment where, we know what's coming, but they don't. At the beginning of the 4th episode from the end, when they say goodbye to each other and they're like, see you in a couple days. I mean, what is more gut-wrenching than that moment? And by the way, books do that kind of thing a lot. Movies and TV shows don't, where the audience knows what's up and you're watching 2 completely clueless actors.
Yeah.
In this case, cartoons. Like, we know what's coming and they don't. That is a very rare storytelling device. And my God, is that gut-wrenching. Gut-wrenching.
Wow. Dude, we could do a whole hour with you just on Clone Wars and on those 4 episodes. I do want to ask you, what was the biggest surprise for you when you put this together? And I want to look at both the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy. What was the thing that you just never had any idea about when it came to the production, the making of the original trilogy, and then the prequel trilogy?
I mean, the originals, I mean, that's the easiest thing in the world. And I love asking Star Wars experts this. I was doing that at San Diego Comic-Con on Friday. I did it at Celebration. You've been doing this 16 years.
Yes.
Have you ever heard that Fox was pressuring them not to film the final battle? Have you ever heard that before?
I knew there was a lot of pushback from Fox, especially when George went back to them seeking $10 million more. And that's probably when that was all being discussed. Alan Ladd was able to get in there and sort of soothe over the board's fears about throwing money away. And it was really Alan Ladd Jr. was the guy taking the bullets for George Lucas running overtime, running over budget. And I do believe I may have actually heard that it was suggested to just end it when they escaped the Death Star. Yes. I think J.W. Rinsler wrote about that.
Yeah, no, that is not in any of his books. I can assure you that. Like, that is not in there.
What about the Alan Ladd Jr. documentary? Have you seen that?
I've seen it. I don't remember it. But by the way, you reminded me. You want to hear something gut wrenching?
Yes.
We had pre-interviewed him. We were 2 days away from doing his interview when he passed.
Oh, that's too bad. That's really too bad.
Yeah.
Because
Anyway,
it was a
back
wealth
to
of
your question.
information.
So that was my biggest surprise with the originals was that there was a lot of talk about the movie ending with the escape. And so Marcia just threw that out there. And I was like, whoa, back up. And that happened a lot with her. She would just throw out mind-blowing stuff and keep talking. I'm like, whoa. And I said to her, I go, well, what do you mean? Like, how would the movie have ended? And she's like, Brian, you've seen the film, right? I'm like, yes, I've seen the film. She's like, they would have fought off those 4 TIE fighters and it would have said directed by George Lucas. And again, I'm pretty sure we would not be here right now had that movie ended that way. I don't think there's an Empire Strikes Back without that. There's a splinter in a mind's eye, but I don't think there's a... but so that's that. And then for the prequels, this may sound like a very boring answer, but for me, this was like, what? Actually, I have two answers. Answer number 1. I had no idea how relevant the Indiana Jones Chronicles were to the prequels. Like, no clue they were related whatsoever. So that blew my mind. And then the other thing that blew my mind, and again, to other people, this may seem like a very boring, trivial thing, but for whatever reason, I'm just like obsessed with this. George was really well thought out and planned for like Phantom Menace. Like, there was like no script 2 weeks before they started shooting Attack of the Clone. Like, they were literally writing. Like, he had spent $100 million building sets and all this stuff was going on. And there was like no script locked. And there was like, and then by the way, same thing happened to a certain extent with Revenge of the Sith. So they're getting closer and closer to shooting. And people are like, hey, George, you're the boss. I love you, man. But they're going to be a script. And it's like, you have to remember, and this often gets forgotten with him, this guy, 5 times in a row, Empire, Jedi, and the prequels, made the most expensive independent film ever. So you would think the guy taking money out of his own bank account, who knows how movies work, might say to himself, we should probably have a script.
Yeah.
So that blew my mind.
But he hates the process, does he? He hates writing. Like, he agonizes over it.
Well, it's in the episode where we got this great line from Phil Tippett, I think in the Return of the Jedi episode, where he's like, I bumped into George in the hallway one day, and I'm like, how you doing, George? And he was like, I wish I was at home watching cartoons. Like, just like
that's what he does.
He's on his way to being a billionaire. He's the most successful filmmaker of all time. If you look at it, like Spielberg is the most successful filmmaker, but he's made like 50 movies.
Right.
George has made 7. So, like, and you know, and he sold it for $4.5 billion in stock. I always like to point that out. That I bought stock in Disney the day that was announced. My stock before this year was up about 140%. So that means George was paid at least $10.2 billion.
Wow.
So, you know, again, you got this guy who, quote unquote, should know better. But I mean, who are any of us to tell him we know better? Like, I don't know about, do you have 4.5 billion? I don't.
No, not on me.
Those guys are, it's hard to get through to those guys. Hey, through all of this, you've done I'm sorry, Brian?
No, go ahead.
Through all of this, you've done documentaries about Star Wars, about collecting Star Wars. What's your relationship like with Lucasfilm? And do you ever foresee a time in the future where you could actually be working for them?
I interviewed somebody that works at Lucasfilm today. So let's start with that. Number 1. Number 2, we were doing something with Lucasfilm that COVID blew up. And it's painful to talk about that.
Oh,
But
man.
yeah, we were, it was scheduled, budgeted, everything. It was a travel show, by the way, so that's why that got canceled. I don't think it's coming back now. So, yes, it would be without a doubt my dream. And again, I talk to them every now and then. I mean, more than every now and then. But, the problem is, like, I see that ILM documentary that's came out, I think, yesterday. I mean, I'm watching the whole thing this weekend. But they announced it. And, of course, I'm human. For a second, I'm like, why didn't they come to me? It's like, well, why would they come to me? They got Ron Howard. They got Lawrence Kasdan. Like, so that's the problem with working with them is, and I don't say this to shit on myself, but like, why would they want to work with me? You know what I mean? Like, they're Lucasfilm. They can get Ron Howard. So I'm going to stay in there. I'm going to keep trying. But if I had to guess, they're going to go with Lawrence Kasdan 7 days a week, twice on Sundays over me. As they should, by the way.
I got to say, man, I feel like you're really, Lucasfilm or no, you're living the dream. I mean, you're a geek, you're a fan, you're making these awesome documentaries that get people talking and binge watching. And you're also a collector, and you started actually making toys yourself. You've got a toy company, and I think you have your first toy that's going to be coming out. I know you have some issues with Mattel, which, by the way, I watched your YouTube video when that first. I did hear about that. Yeah. Hey, fight the good fight, man.
We are.
But you're, as I say, you're kind of living the dream. You're turning the things that you love into, and you're passionate about, into a profession, a career, all of that. So what's next? I think when I see, toys that made us, movies that made us, holiday movies that made us, and this documentary about Star Wars, Icons Unearthed, can you give us an idea of what might be coming up next for you? Is Icons Unearthed going to tackle another franchise? I mean, what's going on?
I mean, we got picked up. So we announced at Comic-Con season 2 is going to be Simpsons. So,
oh my gosh, I didn't know that. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that. Okay, congratulations.
Yes.
Congrats.
Yes, thank you. So, so season 2 is Simpsons. Here's the problem. We have 11 series in production right now. I think only 3 are public. So, like the thing I was doing today, that ain't public. So Toy Store Near You, season 5 comes out later this year. That's on Amazon. Down to Earth with Zac Efron, season 2. That's on Netflix. That comes out this year. I already told you about Simpsons. I think that's the only stuff that's been announced. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm holding out hope for some more toys that made us. I'll tell you that.
I'm holding out hope for the podcast that made us. And it could be all about Rebel Force Radio.
Hey, 16 years in the can. And hey, tell you what, cheap plug here, Brian, but if you love the Clone Wars and you love hearing from Dave Filoni, we've probably logged more interview miles with Dave Filoni than anyone else. So we've got him, we've got him fresh after meetings with George as he was working on the Clone Wars. So it's some cool stuff. I will say there's something I want to do here if you got just a couple more minutes. We don't do this with every guest, but I think you are tailor-made for this. And it's something we call the Yoda questionnaire.
The Yoda questionnaire.
We reserve this for extra special guests. This is a questionnaire that was created by the Jedi Master himself, Master Yoda. He faxed it to us some years ago from Dagobah. And
I love that.
These questions may seem simple on the surface, but they could generate some of the most complex answers.
Yes.
It's funny when I interview people. I did this like 2 hours ago. Every now and then I'll be like, stupid question, possible great answer. Yeah. So I know what you see. I know what you
That's
see.
our motto around here.
All right, here we go with the Yoda questionnaire. Question number 1. Who or what? We want to be very inclusive here with what. Who or what is your favorite Star Wars character?
I hope this is okay. It really is a tie between Luke and Ahsoka.
And
Luke
Ahsoka.
and Ahsoka.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Luke
Without a
Skywalker
doubt, my two favorites. And by the
Ahsoka.
way, it really is Jedi Luke more than A New Hope or even Empire, but it's Luke and Ahsoka.
So you were obviously very excited. I would assume very excited when you saw the return of Jedi Luke in Mandalorian, and then we saw him in.
Well, thanks to some motherfucker on Instagram, I was not as surprised as I should have been.
Rats.
But it's wonderful.
So you didn't have that moment when that X-wing showed up, and you're like, "Could it be? Could it be? Could it be?"
Oh, that was not ruined.
Okay.
That was
good.
not ruined.
Good, yeah, because I didn't hear any
think
leaks about that.
Yeah. No. I got that. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Holy shit. No, I thought you were talking about the Ahsoka, Luke, and Mandalorian.
Oh, right.
Or wait,
Or in
Book of Boba.
Book of Boba, yeah. Isn't that weird? All right. Okay, so we're going to journey to the dark side here. Who or what is your least favorite Star Wars character? Least favorite. One that you just, every time you see him, you just get off the screen.
Fucking what's his name? What the hell's his name? The guy who owns Anakin.
Watto.
Oh, Watto.
Oh,
he does
God.
No
I mean,
love for
Watto is
Watto.
designed to be disliked, but what is it about him? Yeah. What is it about Watto that?
First of all, he's stupid. Like, so I never like watching stupid characters. Like, he's just not smart. Second of all, I mean, he's like, there's such a weird thing with Phantom Menace. like, and again, I'm not one of these people that hates the movie, but like, there's this line in the film, and again, nobody talks about this line, but to me, it is literally the strangest thing. There's literally a line where Anakin says to Jean, what do you call it? Quan Jin.
Qui-Gon.
He says, Qui-Gon. He's like, well, you're a Jedi. Can you free my mom? And he literally says, nah, we don't do that. And it's like, my whole life, Jedi were like the beacons of good.
Right.
You don't free slaves? Okay. Like, all right. I guess maybe that's a line. The Jedi don't, maybe they work. I don't know. Back to Star Trek. I'm always like, why doesn't the Federation have cloaking devices? Like, you got everything else, but you can't cloak. You need some dumbass treaty with the what?
Some sort of moral thing?
I'm like, so then back to Saboba, it's like, that's his name, right?
Watto.
Watto.
Yes.
Like, with Watto, by the way, I'm not a big Saboba fan either, because they're just so two-dimensional. That's really, because I've never been asked this question before. It's a great question. That's really, if I could erase everything I've said and start over, that's what I would start with. These are two-dimensional characters.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm the bad slave guy owning a kid and his mom. I'm the evil pod race driver, like this. Like, it's so two-dimensional, and it's like almost uncomfortable.
Nothing from Last Jedi here on least favorite character. No Snoke. No.
Dude, I don't talk about that movie.
It doesn't even show up on his radar.
I shouldn't even say this, but I'm literally sitting in the movie watching it. The one time I've seen it, I'm literally sitting there being like, I need to start scrubbing this out of my memory. Like, I need to find a way to make it like this didn't happen.
Tell you what, Brian, we have a good friend on the show, great guy, who Mac and I started talking about Last Jedi, and he got up and just walked out of the recording of the podcast.
Can't even talk about it.
Okay. So what Star Wars, and by the way, when we say Star Wars, we mean, we can include Clone Wars, all that stuff. But what
Everything.
scene in Star Wars always makes you smile? No matter how many times you see it, it always puts a smile on your face.
R2D2 going up on his tippy toes, looking in the window at Dagobah.
Man, we have had people say that before. That is, I don't want to say it's a common answer, but we have heard it before. It's funny how that really resonates with people.
Yeah.
By the way, probably sharing too much right now. Anytime I go on my tippy toes, that's what I'm thinking.
You know, we had an opportunity.
That was an ad lib. That was a directorial ad lib by Irvin Kershner.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we heard that from the mouth of Irvin Kershner, I think at Celebration 5. And not too long before he passed away. It was so cool to actually hear those stories from him. Talk about humanizing the Star Wars characters.
Yeah,
Legend.
I'm so jealous of you guys.
Next question. What Star Wars scene always makes you sad? Is there a scene that just always gets you in the gut every time?
I mean, yeah. Again, I said it before. This would have been my answer, but when Ahsoka and Anakin say goodbye for the last time as who they were before what they become. I mean,
when does that happen? Does that happen at the end of season 5, or does that happen at the series finale?
No. It's the end. It's the 4th episode from the end of Clone Wars.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They're on the big clone, the clone command ship with the dual bridges, and he'd already given her the new lightsabers,
right?
And literally, one of them says, "See you in 2 days," and in an hour, Anakin's gonna be killing Dooku, which is really when he becomes a Sith, and her life's about to, and also the ending. I mean, just Anakin standing there in the snow. Both of those moments have in common, you're seeing a character understanding in full Technicolor a different life he could have had. Like, he's in the snow. All his former friends, clones, have their helmets on spikes. There's a cracked in half, whatever those Star Destroyers were called back then. I always call them the dual bridge Star Destroyers because I love that they have 2 bridges and why they have 2 bridges. But it's just gut wrenching. It's just gut wrenching. It's the death of his friend. It's just such a gut-wrenching moment.
All right, one last question. I'm going to modify this one a little bit. It's not the original question from Yoda because you're a director. So let's say there's another Star Wars film to be made. You're the director, and George Lucas is executive producer, and he's there on set with you as you're wrapping the film. What would you like to hear George say to you as you say cut on the last scene before you wrap?
I can only answer this question because I've only met George for about 11 seconds, so I don't know him at all. But, I've been reading about him my whole life. My career choices because of him. Making the documentary, I was eat, sleeping, breathing George Lucas for, about 7 months. Quote unquote, knowing him the way I know him, which again, that's 11 seconds worth of time in reality. The only thing I could expect him to say that would be meaningful is good job. Because I know from him, but from him, he's not a big flowery language guy. He's not a hug you guy. He's a real practical, pragmatic business person who happens to be in a creative field. He's also very efficient with his words. But I also know he means what he says.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if I'm sitting there and we're wrapping up, that's That's if he said, "Good job, Brian." That'd be the greatest thing anyone ever said to me.
Well, I'll tell you what, as from one fan to another, someone who's loved so much of your work and excited to watch what you have in store, I say, good job, Brian. And thank you for being on the show. And thank you for this documentary. Really and truly.
Make me cry.
Well, I'll tell you what, man, you are welcome here on Rebel Force Radio anytime you want. We're one of the longest running Star Wars podcasts on the planet. Probably the best most downloaded one on the planet. So
who on earth could be longer than 16 years?
I don't think anyone.
Not aware of any. Nope. None of any consequence.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure you won. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you won.
Put it that way. So, hey, anytime you want to come and talk Star Wars with us, you're always welcome. Thank you for this great documentary. I'm so excited to see the next 3 episodes, and so excited to see what's next for you and this amazing, fun company that you've put together.
Thank you, guys. And this was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about.
It really is.
So it's Icons Unearthed Tuesday nights. Tuesday nights, we have 3 episodes left, right? And they drop on Tuesday nights on Vice TV.
The hell out of the first 3, so you can catch the repeats.
Yeah,
great.
Oh, and
they're all good.
Episode, we just put the first episode up on YouTube, on Vice's YouTube channel.
Oh wow!
So because we've been hearing from a lot of people, what's Vice? Where do I find Vice? So go watch YouTube. If you like the episode, then take a couple minutes to find Vice.
All right, we'll get the link. We'll get the link out on our website. That's great that it's on. That it's on there.
Thanks,
all right,
Brian.
man. Thank you so much.
Have a good night.
You too, buddy.
You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. Wow.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Boy, one of us, indeed.
No
doubt. Is one of us.
Oh, no doubt. Wow. You know what? We promised at the top of the show, we said that we would get to just a couple of clips of Genevieve O'Reilly and Diego Luna. You want to do that?
No, they can wait. They can wait. I'm happy to push that stuff aside just to have had that conversation with Brian. Of course, Andor doesn't debut until the end of August, so we got some time to hear what those 2 guys have to say about the show we haven't seen yet. So, I was just happy, and it was so nice of him to delay his other call.
Yeah, wow.
For us, I mean that was really
that is a high compliment.
Yeah,
he must have been enjoying the convo.
Yeah,
but
that's like George saying, "Good job, kid." You know, that's what that is.
Right.
So, yeah, we really appreciate that, and we suggest everyone check out all of his documentaries, especially Icons Unearthed, Tuesday nights on Vice, and he's definitely a guy I think would fit in some future conversations here on Rebel Force Radio.
No doubt, man. No doubt.
Maybe we can establish something a little more frequently with Brian because, like I said, I get that vibe from him. One of us.
Chewie, get us out of here!
All right, that's going to wrap things up for this week. Big thanks. Big thanks to Brian Volk-Weiss for joining us in the cantina. Be sure to check out Icons Unearthed Star Wars and go on Netflix and watch the movies that made us, the toys that made us, the holiday movies that made us. Some really great stuff. He's got such a unique style. I love it. And this Star Wars documentary is a ton of fun. Also, huge thanks to our sponsors this week, MeUndies and Indeed. Thanks for supporting the show. If you'd like to get more Rebel Force Radio in your life, and why wouldn't you? One way to do that is to go over to rebelforceradio.com and click on that Patreon banner. And you do that, you'll find different ways that you can support this podcast as well as get all kinds of benefits. Those benefits include things like the weekly full show video. So instead of just listening to the podcast, you can actually be watching the podcast. What do you think of that? You can also get exclusive podcasts that you cannot find anywhere else. You're not going to find them on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or anything like that. RFR Q&A, The Babu Freaks, Clone Wars Declassified Remastered, The Filoni Files, Archive Highlights, so much more, all available to you when you're a Patreon member. Plus, if you're joining us for a live show, in fact, next week, we'll be going live. Rancho Obi-Wan, Jimmy Mac there with Steve Sansweet for the full show. if you identify yourself as a Patreon member to our great call screener, Tyler Page, he'll make sure you get to the head of the line. Okay, so make sure that you Patreon members say, hey, Tyler, I'm a Patreon member. And you are joining a community of some of the best Star Wars fans in the galaxy. People that just love to talk about Star Wars on the merits of Star Wars. All those details can be found at patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio, or as I say, go to rebelforceradio.com and click on that banner, and you'll find all the details there. If you want to check us out on YouTube, we'd love to have you. Go to youtube.com/Rebel Force Radio. We've got, we're always dropping new stuff. There's a lot of times some of the segments of the podcast that you can only see the video portion of when you're a Patreon member. Some of those segments show up on YouTube. So go to youtube.com/Rebel Force Radio. It also hosts, we were talking with Brian about the 16-year history of this podcast. You've got highlights and various things from the 16-year history of our adventures together, podcasting about Star Wars, interviews like Mark Hamill, for instance, Anthony Daniels, Peter Mayhew, the late, great Peter Mayhew, Dave Prowse, Jeremy Bullock, lots of Filoni. Check it out. All that is on YouTube. Carrie Fisher and the Chicken Fingers. Yeah, bring him here. Talk to these guys. These talk to them. But if you'd like to talk to us in between shows, we'd love to hear your voicemail. We love to read your email, show@rebelforceradio.com. That's the email address. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, 708-320-1737. That's 708-320-1RFR. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on Twitter, so please follow us there. But if you want to help out the show, there's no better way than to keep listening and to tell your fellow Star Wars fans about us here at Rebel Force Radio. We're streaming 24/7 on Apple Podcasts. You can find us over at Jedi News. We're on iHeart, TuneIn, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon, Audible, Pandora, Samsung. Anywhere you can find podcasts, you'll find us right here at Rebel Force Radio. And you'll find us here next week, live. Rebel Force Radio coming to you in part from Rancho Obi-Wan, as Jimmy Mack brings Mr. Steve Sansweet to the show for a live show. First ever live appearance, I think. Well, maybe we did some of those coast to coasts back in the day. But as far as a real serious sit down with Steve Sansweet, this is something you're not going to want to miss. And all of the super chats, all those proceeds, 100% go to Rancho Obi-Wan. Can't wait. It's going to be a lot of fun. So we'll see you next time. Love you all so much. For Rebel Force Radio, I'm Jason.
And I'm Jimmy Mack.
And remember,
The Force will be with you, always.